Boys, today we're looking at simple cubic equations. Yesterday we looked at equations that were quadratic, or they had x to the power of 2. So for example, this question here at the end of that section, where you would solve it. So 7x squared would be equal to 28. X squared equals 4, dividing by 7 on both sides. And then the last step, you would square root both sides, and so you'd get x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 4, which is equal to plus or minus 2. And so you get both a positive and negative solution. So they're the quadratics, and they have x to the power of 2. Now with today's cubic equations, they now have the highest power of the variable being 3. So x cubed we would have in our questions. Alrighty, and so the way we solve these ones is, instead of square rooting, we cube root. So if x cubed in 1a is 64, then the answer to our equation is going to be x is going to be equal to the cube root of 64, which is 4. Now in our second example, you'll notice that it's the same equation, except there is a negative in front of the 64. With quadratic equations, we saw in the final example we did on our Zoom chat that the negative, if you're finding a negative of a square root, you can't do that. There'd be no real solutions to that one. But with a cube, we can actually have a negative solution. We can actually cube root a negative, because if we just take an example like minus 2, and we cube that, then that would equal to minus 2 times minus 2 times minus 2, which would give us negative 8. And so if you were doing that in reverse, you could find the cube root of negative 8, and you get minus 2, so it works. Alrighty, so in this example, x is going to be equal to cube root of negative 64, which will be negative 4. Another thing to notice here is that we only have one solution. We don't have multiple solutions. Alrighty, last one, cube root of 125. X will be equal to, x cubed equals 125, so we cube root 125, which gives us 5. Okay, we could be asked to leave this in exact form, which we talked about last time, where you leave it as a surd. Alrighty, so this one would be x is equal to the cube root of 84, and that you'd be done there. Okay, another scenario could be having to leave it to a couple of decimal places. So if we find the cube root of 45, get 3.556. So the answer to this equation here would be x equals cube root of 45, which equals 3.556. Blah, 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 continues. And so your final answer will be 3.56, 2 decimal places. Okay, we'll likewise to looking at the quadratics. You might also need to do some steps to get the x cubed on its own. So for example, int 4a here, you would need to divide by 2 on both sides to get x cubed equals 8. And so then you'd cube root both sides, so x would be equal to the cube root of 8, which would be 2. So that is solving cubic equations. Good luck with your questions.